I am tired of running for shade. And aren't you tired of being hustled and played? And aren't we all tired of crying about how hard it is to be black in America, even if it looks like we've got it made?
Malcolm-Jamal Warner, dead at the age of 54 on a drowning accident while he was vacationing with his family in Costa Rica.
Has this been difficult for you?
Yeah. Because when you watch someone who you know and love, go through what he's going through.
Malcolm-Jamal Warner dead at the age of 54. He lost his life in a tragic drowning accident while vacationing with his family in Costa Rica. His death wasn't just a heartbreaking loss for his loved ones and fans. It was also a chilling echo of the warnings he left behind in his final message. He said, "I am tired of running for shade. And are not you tired of being hustled and played? And are not we all tired of crying about how hard it is to be black in America, even if it looks like we've got it made?" These words weren't just poetic expressions. They were loaded, emotional, and deeply reflective words that hit harder now, knowing what would come next. In one of his last conversations, Malcolm was asked if it had been difficult for him. He paused, clearly shaken, and said, "Yeah, because when you watch someone who you know and love go through what he's going through." Malcolm-Jamal Warner, forever remembered as Theo Huxtable from The Cosby Show, was gone. But his final public words weren't just a goodbye, they felt like a warning. And if for some reason you can't find a reason to smile, then that's probably the best time to be the reason for somebody else to smile. Now that he's passed, people have started asking the hard questions. Why wasn't anyone listening? Why does it seem like every time a black artist begins to speak uncomfortable truths, they're silenced? Freedom has its limits, he once said. And now here we are, grief etched across faces, pain stretching through communities, and trauma stitched into the very DNA of black identity. This wasn't just another celebrity tragedy. For many, it felt like part of a disturbing pattern that's becoming impossible to ignore. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's sudden death shocked fans worldwide and left others suspicious. The 54-year-old actor, cherished for his role as Theo on The Cosby Show, reportedly drowned while swimming off the coast of Clay's Beach in Limon, Costa Rica. Authorities claimed it was a tragic accident, strong currents, bad timing. Some witnesses said he was rescued by beachgoers, but according to the Costa Rican Red Cross, Warner was found with no vital signs and later taken to the morgue. Still, something didn't sit right: the timing, the circumstances, and most of all the message he released just days before his death. It all felt too heavy, too loaded with meaning to be a coincidence. Because Malcolm wasn't just relaxing on vacation. He was also on a mission to speak truth, no matter the cost. Can you tell me the fate of a people who consciously take the bait and embrace the very traits placed upon them by their captors, who, by design, are inclined to keep them believing they're second-rate? I wait. These weren't random words. They were from his final podcast episode, recorded for Not All Hood, released just 2 days before he died. Fans now call it his farewell in disguise. He didn't talk about surface-level things. This episode was deep, urgent, and raw. Malcolm reflected on a powerful exchange he'd had with spoken-word artist Tamika Georgia Mee Harper, who challenged the name of his podcast. When he told her the show was called Not All Hood, she shot back immediately, "Ain't nothing wrong with the hood." That one comment sparked a full-on introspective spiral for Malcolm. He began unpacking how the media had long controlled the narrative around black culture, presenting only one version, the hood story. Always the struggle, always the danger, always the stereotype. But what about the richness, the pride, the nuance, the identity? He explained. The reason for the title is combating the narrative of black life or black culture that the media focuses on. He wasn't distancing himself from the hood, far from it. He was calling out the system that exploits it, distorts it, and profits from it. In Malcolm's own words, the hood side, ultimately historically, is what has always created American culture. That wasn't just a cultural observation. That was a declaration, a shot fired at decades of appropriation, cultural erasure, and whitewashed storytelling. a truth Hollywood has tried to bury, but he didn't stop there. Malcolm also revealed that his views on black excellence had changed over time. He once saw the term as shallow, tied too closely to fame, wealth, and performative success. But then he learned about how black soldiers had been systematically left out of the historical records at Arlington National Cemetery, and that changed everything. Black survival, in and of itself, is black excellence, he said. Not fame, not awards, not money, just survival. That line hit hard then, and now, in the aftermath of his death, it lands like a prophecy. He had been trying to show that black identity was not a monolith. He said it openly that there are countless levels and lanes within the black community that deserve space, discussion, and respect. That survival day by day is itself an act of excellence. And then, just like that, within 48 hours of dropping that episode, he was gone. For an entire generation, Malcolm-Jamal Warner was more than just a TV actor. As Theo Huxtable, he brought warmth, humor, and complexity to the role of a teen navigating dyslexia, identity, and family life. He was a fixture in millions of homes, the friendly, goofy, lovable only son who made people laugh and think at the same time. But behind that image, behind the clean-cut smile and the reruns, was a much deeper, more serious man. And as we now know, he had been trying to tell us that for years. In recent years, Malcolm-Jamal Warner had grown increasingly vocal, and not just about entertainment. He was speaking about survival, identity, and the mental cost of being black in America. In his final podcast episode, he poured his heart out, but was anyone truly listening? He said, "You can't be pro-black and not be pro-black woman. You can't be pro-black and not be pro-black child. You can't be pro-black and not be pro-black LGBTQ+. His voice was clear, serious, unwavering. He wasn't interested in safe conversations. He was challenging his own audience to dig deeper, confront their own contradictions, and get honest. That was Malcolm's evolution. The funny teen heartthrob from The Cosby Show had become a grown man unafraid to speak uncomfortable truths. He understood how culture, media, and systems of power shaped public perception, and he wasn't about to stay silent. Even though his image had long been tied to family-friendly television, Malcolm never hesitated to call out hypocrisy, especially within his own community. And that takes courage, but it wasn't just cultural critique. Malcolm was also offering clarity and hope. "I believe when we see each other, truly see each other, there's nothing we can't do." That hope wasn't naive. It was rooted in experience in the decades he had spent inside an industry that often failed people who looked like him. One of the most heartbreaking moments from that last episode was his reflection on how hard it is for black men to grieve. "We haven't been taught how to cry. We haven't been taught how to hold space for each other's grief," he said, "so we bury it, and we bury ourselves." That vulnerability was rare. In a world where black men are often expected to be stoic, unbreakable, and always in control, Malcolm dared to be human, and in doing so, he gave others permission to do the same. He didn't just talk, he acted. He mentored younger actors, spoke at schools, and supported projects that amplified black voices. But what he couldn't do was change the system on his own, and he knew that. He once said, "We have to be careful that we're not just creating new versions of the same machine. We need different rules. We need different leaders. We need different outcomes." That wasn't just a call for reform. It was a call for revolution. And now, with his death so fresh, people are asking hard questions. Why now? Why so suddenly? Why did his final message sound like a goodbye? There are no clear answers. Authorities ruled it an accident, a drowning, nothing suspicious. But the coincidence is hard to ignore. He had just released a podcast challenging power structures, calling out systemic erasure, and demanding new narratives. Then, within 48 hours, he was gone. To some, it feels like just a sad accident. To others, it feels like something more. For many black artists, speaking out comes with risk. The more outspoken they become, the less visible they seem to get until they vanish altogether. Malcolm wasn't the first to push against the grain. but his timing, tone, and message all carry weight. Even his closing line in the podcast now sounds haunting. If you don't know what to do, be kind loudly, be kind boldly, be kind relentlessly. That's not just advice. That's a final wish. He knew the world was listening, but he may not have known how loud the silence would be once he was gone. Since the news of his passing broke, tributes have poured in from fans, co-stars, and fellow artists. But others have noticed a disturbing trend: the lack of major media coverage. No headlines, no network specials, just a passing mention here and there. How is it that someone so central to one of the most influential television shows in history could be treated like an afterthought? This wasn't just an actor. Malcolm-Jamal Warner helped shape the image of young black men in the American consciousness. His portrayal of Theo Huxtable was groundbreaking. He made space for vulnerability, intelligence, and emotional honesty in ways that few characters ever had. And yet, after his death, silence. Some point to how the legacy of The Cosby Show has been overshadowed by the controversy surrounding Bill Cosby. They argue that the show's association with scandal has tainted the reputations of its cast, even those who did nothing wrong. But that's unfair. Malcolm didn't cause that, he carried it. For decades, he carried the weight of something that wasn't his burden to bear. And now, in death, he's being silenced all over again. His final podcast episode wasn't a viral hit. It didn't trend. It didn't spark debate on morning shows. It was simply ignored, and that's what hurts the most. Because Malcolm wasn't just talking about his own pain, he was giving a voice to millions of others who had no platform. He was standing in the gap, using his reach to make space for truth. And that truth got buried. Just like him, it's hard not to wonder what he would have said next, what topics he would have tackled, what new voices he would have helped amplify. But now that story is cut short. Yet, some say he left behind more than words. He left behind a blueprint of how to be in this world with integrity, courage, and care. How to challenge systems while still believing in people. How to be tired and still keep going. Malcolm wasn't a saint. He was a man. A deeply thoughtful, deeply feeling man who used his life to push back against the lies. And in the end, his silence speaks volumes. In the days following Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death, the world seemed to move on far too quickly. There were no major tributes from television networks, no tribute specials, no public candlelight vigils or industry-wide moments of silence. Just another headline buried beneath celebrity gossip and trending drama. But for those who grew up watching The Cosby Show, and for those who understood what Malcolm truly stood for, the loss cut deep. Raven, Simone, his longtime co-star and friend, was among the few who spoke up. Through tears, she said, "Words cannot describe the pain and sadness and surprise that I feel with the recent loss of MJW. That emotion wasn't performative. It was raw, unfiltered grief, the kind that comes not just from the loss of a person, but from the loss of protection. Because Malcolm wasn't just a colleague to Raven, he was a shield. A silent protector during her most vulnerable years in an industry that often chews up and spits out child stars. He made her feel safe when safety was a luxury. Raven once said she couldn't even remember certain moments on set because she had mentally clicked off. That's a trauma response dissociation, and the fact that she could still remember the safety she felt around Malcolm says everything. He didn't save her with grand gestures, he saved her by showing up. By being kind, by seeing her not just as talent, but as a child who deserved protection and dignity. And now that he's gone, that layer of comfort, that invisible force that once stood between her and harm, is gone too. For many fans, that is what makes this loss so unbearable. Malcolm represented the best of what the industry could be, not just in front of the camera, but behind it. He wasn't chasing clout. He wasn't trying to be a superstar. He was trying to be honest, and that honesty came at a cost. His final messages weren't light-hearted send-offs. They were calls to action, delivered with urgency. His words were laced with frustration, sorrow, and hope all at once. He spoke of survival as a form of excellence. He warned against believing the stories written by those who benefit from Black pain. He challenged us to be loud in our kindness, relentless in our love, and brave in our truth. And now he's gone. We don't get to know what he would have said next. We don't get to hear his voice grow louder or see his influence expand. We only get to hold onto what he left behind and ask ourselves what we'll do with it. Will we honor his words? Will we protect the children in the industry now? Will we create space for Black artists to speak freely without fear of being ignored or punished? Because if we don't, then this won't be the last time we lose someone like Malcolm far too soon. There's a reason people are drawing connections, a reason fans are revisiting his final podcast episode, quoting his words and pointing out the eerie timing of it all. It's not just conspiracy, it's heartbreak. A collective ache from communities that have been told again and again that their voices don't matter, that their heroes don't matter, that their grief doesn't matter. But Malcolm mattered, and not just as Theo. Not just as a character on a show from decades ago. He mattered because of how he lived when no one was watching. How he supported his peers. How he used his platform not to build a brand, but to build a bridge. He didn't chase headlines, he chased healing, and maybe that's why he didn't get the media send off others might have, because he wasn't marketable in the way they wanted him to be. He wasn't controversial for clicks or flashy enough for social media. He was just real, and that's rare. The industry doesn't know what to do with people like Malcolm, people who won't play the game, who won't betray their people, who won't sell a false version of themselves for fame. And so, when he passed, they did what they always do with inconvenient truth. Tellers, they moved on quickly, but we don't have to. We can choose to remember. We can choose to amplify the message he left behind. We can choose to keep asking the hard questions, even when they make others uncomfortable. Malcolm's story didn't end with his death. It ended with his message, and that message is now in our hands. It's up to us to carry it forward, to be kind loudly, to be honest bravely, and to be the reason someone else can smile even when they can't find one on their own. Because if Malcolm taught us anything, it's that survival is not weakness, it's excellence. And even in silence, his truth is still echoing.